In a change to the advertised schedule, the 6 o'clock news will now be shown at 9 p.m. and the 9 o'clock news will be shown at the earlier time of 6 p.m. Right now, however, strap yourselves in for the 80s Nostalgia podcast. This week's chat is with radio presenter, former Mullet owner and Funhouse TV presenter, Pat Sharp.
So you were at school very late 60s to mid to late 70s. Were you academic?
Gosh, I was exactly the opposite, Craig. I was pretty good on the sports field and pretty rubbish in the classrooms. I always say whenever I'm doing an after dinner or something, I say I went to school at 9, was always sent home by 11.
Favourite lessons were things like PE?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I used to just sit in maths and think, what a waste of time. And ironically now, when I'm sitting doing figures and things, as I do, quite a lot of my own administration, and I quite like that. And I'm really good at maths in my head now. So I think it must have sunk in, but just not at the time as far as my results were concerned, because I was poor. I came out of school with 1 O-level, and that was from a wonderfully, sort of paid private education, so I should have done a lot better than I did, but I just wasn't interested. I just wanted to be on the sports pitch, or I was thinking about trying to sneak a radio in, really, and listen to the radio.
And what do you think the best playground games were?
God, let me think. I went to all boys' schools all my life, of which one of them is now takes girls now, but at the time didn't. So I don't know. I can remember, I suppose, just running around and hiding in the playground, because they had sort of all sorts of walls and things within it. So I can remember hiding and doing stuff like hide and seek when I was very young. And I think as you got older, I suppose the best game for me was Conkers, which, of course, if you've seen the recent Bros movie After the Screaming Stops, they were very upset that conkers are now considered to be dangerous and a hazard. So I came from the times when conkers were acceptable, and you could bring your conker to school and bake it in the oven before you got there, and then try and get a 25er, which meant that you'd won 24 fights and yours became a 25er. So I think for me, conkers does stand out as being the main playground game for me over the years. And there was nothing nicer than going to school with a conker on a piece of string in your pocket and waiting for break so that you could go out and smash all the others to bits.
I do have a bit of a confession, actually. When I was at primary school, my dad made me a conker out of epoxy resin, and it was that, he varnished it. It looked just like a conker. It was that solid. He had to attach it to a wire rather than to a piece of string. And it got knocked off the wire one time, and we had this rule called stomps, where you could stomp on a conker if someone dropped it.
Yep.
And my friend, one of my school friends, Mark, stomped on it, and Mark was quite a chunky boy, and it survived Mark's foot as well. So it was as a multi-million conker.
Can you imagine now with the piece of wire actually playing conkers, and how much that would be a health and safety problem? My God, you'd be like evicted in the front of Mail Online.
Did radio feature much in your early life?
It featured from a point of view that when I was at school, I was certainly listening to it. I was listening to Capital Radio. I lived in London, and I would never miss the Hitline Top 10 with Roger Scott, and I would listen every day when I could, when I got home from school and on the way. So, yeah, radio featured in a huge part of me in my life, and certainly on weekends and stuff, I'd be sitting taping things, but I would be the exact opposite of probably what most kids were taping with the Top 40. I would be taping the DJs and links and the jingles and cutting out the songs, whereas everybody else was trying to do the other way.
Yeah, trying to make your own mixtapes when I was doing that. You try and avoid the DJs.
Exactly, yeah. And everybody with the top 40, the whole idea was to, get the songs that you could from the top 40 and just work out just when the DJ was going to speak, so you could stop the recording, and that would save you buying the records in the shop, and you would then have the whole top 40 on tape for that week and wouldn't need to worry about buying the records. I was the other way around. I was just getting all the links and the jingles and trying to cut the records out.
So did you know quite early on what you wanted to do?
I think so, yeah, absolutely. I would say from age about probably certainly early teens, probably 14, I would think. Perhaps not 13, but certainly 14, 15. I was very much into, the radio. I even had a cassette radio, and it was a great big one. I don't even remember the name of it. I know that it was the make, ironically, was a Sharp, and I think I put a bit of Letraset in front of it and put Pat, and considered that was my radio station. And my Sharp, I think it was called a GF 9191. It'll be worth Googling, but it was certainly something like that. And it was a double cassette, so it had two cassettes on it, one each side, so you could actually then take from tape to tape and cut out the bits you didn't want and make a new tape. So that was kind of my first earliest form of editing, and also it had a button on it that enabled you to turn it down when the song was on the radio, and that dropped the level of the song on the radio, and I could insert my voice through the mics that were built into the cassette radio. And the finished article would be me actually doing an intro over the song that was on the radio, and you could keep that on the cassette and then use it as a demo. So I was basically playing at radio probably when I was sort of 14.
And were your parents into theatrical or broadcasting roles, and did they encourage you?
They did encourage me. My mum actually did go to RADA. She's 89. She'll be 90 next birthday, and she was at RADA with the likes of people like Lionel Jeffries, who was the grandfather in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and many other roles, and also Joan Collins and Warren Mitchell, famous actors. And my mum was in some of the early St. Trinian's movies as well as sort of an extra. So she did a little bit of acting, but she did go to RADA, which is the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. So it's quite a prestigious place to go. And they certainly encouraged me, both my mum and dad. Yeah, they were very keen on me doing whatever I wanted to do and help me on my way. If that's what I wanted to do, that's what I wanted to do. They weren't saying, oh, you've had this wonderful private education, go and be a doctor or an accountant. So it wasn't like that. They were happy for me to do what I wanted to do, as I think any parent should be.
And your first radio presenting job was at the BBC when you were 20.
Yeah.
And you started studying for Steve Wright. How did you go from school to radio so quickly?
Well, I suppose right place, right time, Craig, to be honest with you. I was doing mobile discos, and I'd also worked in Germany for a company as a DJ in a nightclub in Germany. Took all my records that I had in the back of my Ford Cortina and shot over to Germany and was a DJ in a nightclub 6 nights a week and lived there for like 4 months. So that was quite good to do and gave me a bit of experience. I was only about probably 17, 18 when I did that. And then I basically started sending off demo tapes, and somebody got in to one of my gigs, a wedding or something I was doing with my mobile disco back in the UK. Then after my trip to Germany, there was a guy there who was he was a record plugger, so to speak. You know, he would go around to radio stations with records and try and get the DJs or the producers interested in playing them. And he was at this wedding and said to me, "Oh, you're a really good DJ. You should go and meet me in London and try and get you into radio," because that's what I said I wanted to do. So I did that, and he sort of got me in touch with Johnny Walker, who he knew obviously from Radio 1, who was left the BBC and was about to start launching the new Radio Caroline from a ship out in the North Sea again. And I was allegedly going to be on this ship and do something with Johnny Walker, but it never happened. The ship never got off the ground. It never started again. This was probably 1981 or something like that, yeah. So nothing ever came of that. He then got me in touch with an agent, because I said to him, nothing's happening here. I can't sit around waiting all my life. I'm getting old. I'm going to be 20. So, very impatient there to get on the radio. So he put me in touch with an agent who was Michael Cohen, who looked after a number of Radio 1 DJs at the time, people like Simon Bates and Mike Reed and Dave Lee Travis and Paul Gambaccini and Annie Nightingale and many others. He eventually decided he would take me onto his books, even though I was unknown. It was a matter of taking on one new DJ, one unknown DJ, with a chance to make them into a bit of a star. And it was myself or Paul McKenna, who was already DJing at that time, I think on Chiltern Radio. And Paul decided that he wouldn't go with Michael because he didn't want to pay the commission, which at the time was 25%. Thought that was a little bit high. So I figured that 25% of something was an awful lot better than the nothing of nothing that I had. So I figured, yeah, I'll pay 85%. I don't have a problem with any commission. Just get me on. I'll do it for free. So I went with Michael, and that was in April 1982. And in August 82, he called me into his office just 4 months after I'd been with him and said, come and meet me in the office. A young lady here, it's called Doreen Davis, likes your demo and is ready to take you on, and you're going to do a week covering Steve Wright on Radio 1, even though you've never been on the radio before in your life. And I just went, okay, that's kind of worrying. And also, not only was it kind of worrying, but on top of that, it was the fact that I wasn't over worried about it, because I thought to myself, well, it's only Radio 1. I mean, obviously it'd be much better if I was on Capital, living in London, not really having even heard Radio 1, because nobody really listened to it on AM in London when you had Capital booming out on FM, and it was very popular. So I thought, I'll do that. Yeah, that's not a problem for me, because, it's just Radio 1. So it was quite ironic that I thought about that as being a bit naff.
Just Radio 1.
Yeah, just Radio 1. Yeah, it's crazy. So I ended up on the 6th of September 1982. I started on the afternoon show after Dave Lee Travis and before Peter Powell, covering Steve Wright in the afternoon, which was, I think when it did come down to it was pretty good and exciting and nerve-wracking. So don't get me wrong, I'm not being blasé about it, but I just think being a Londoner and, listening to Capital and loving sort of those DJs, for me, it was, wasn't a station I wanted to be on, which is ironic, because you start at Radio 1, it's pretty much downhill from there.
But Radio 1, to me, is the sort of thing that you would work up to get into.
100%, yeah. But many of my contemporaries never, ever made it to Radio 1 or Capital or Heart or Smooth or wherever I am now. They never did it. So I'm really blessed and very lucky that I made it to pretty much all those places and certainly started there, And I had nearly a year at Radio 1, got my own show after doing a couple of weeks out at Radio Luxembourg. I got my own show and came back and started on Radio 1 as one of the 3 new DJs with Gary Davis and Janice Long. And, we were given our Radio 1 jackets with our names on them, and we were on top of the pops, and it was obviously it was a lot bigger than being on Capital Radio, because you were suddenly nationally known and had exposure on television and radio that you wouldn't be getting anywhere else. And in those days, with not many radio stations and very few TV channels, you were known and seen, and you could get paid great money for doing PAs and stuff. So it was great. I loved it. It's only a short period of time that I did it, but I hosted Top of the Pops and ended up singing on Top of the Pops at a later date due to the Capital Radio Help a London Child charity records. And I even co-hosted the very last Top of the Pops with only a handful of DJs back in 2007, I think. So I was pretty lucky and had a good fun at the Beeb, even though it was short and sweet. It was fun to do. You
are one of the few people that has not only presented Top of the Pops, but also been on Top of the Pops as well.
As I said, yeah, you're right. I think there is a few that have done that. I know Dave Lee Travis has done it, and Paul Burnett, because of that Laurie Lingo and the Dipsticks, I think it was. And Blackburn, I think, must have done it as well. I think he probably must have sung on Top of the Pops as well as hosted it, because he had quite a few records out. I don't know if they got as far as being hits for Top of the Pops, but either way, so it must be him. I don't know who else would qualify for that, but certainly I'm one of the few, yeah. And that was because of the Pat and Mick charity records that we made at Help a London Child, and one of them got in the top 10. So it was quite bizarre being on Top of the Pops, being introduced by sort of your contemporaries like Bruno Brooks and people going, well, here they are, they can't dance, and I think they quite liked having us on there. It was a bit of a laugh for them as well, but very amusing to be on, to be on as a singer when you're not a singer, and I sing in the bath and the water gets out. It's that bad. I'm sitting on this show, just sort of literally, obviously miming, because it was the days when you were meant to mime, you were told to mime. There was no live vocals, and I'm miming away and thinking, oh my God, as I'm saying the words, what are the next words? I have no idea. I can't remember them, so I just used to cover my face or turn around and try and do a spin. So it was quite terrifying trying to be a pop star when you're not.
And were you approached with a view to releasing a single, or was it an idea that you had and suggested?
No, it was all Richard Park's idea, the controller at Capital Radio at the time, and he turned around and said to Pete Waterman, because we were playing a lot of we'd made Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan and all those guys famous by playing their records. So he turned around and said to me, he said, I want my guys and my young DJs to make a record for our charity. And we can obviously play it on the radio station and it might be a hit. So off we went to make a record, and sure enough, because we played it and told all the kids who listened to our show to buy it, it became a hit. And then suddenly, obviously around the country, people heard it on other radio stations and went, oh, I like this song, it's a good song, and they're good cover versions, they're well produced by Stockacre Waterman, so what's not to like? Flavour of the month, and we ended up having 5 or 6 hit singles and an album.
When I've said online quite a few times, I'm a huge fan of Stockacre and Waterman.
Okay.
If there was a favourite decade for me, music-wise, it would be 85 to 95, just because I love all... I know it's classed as cheesy pop, but I love that just the sound that they put together. It's superb.
I think they weren't great pop songs for the time, but I think like anything, after a while, they just become, there was too many of them, and the floodgates opened and everything sounded the same. They all had that sort of same sound. I mean, we used to go in there and, you know, we would get called into their studio over by London Bridge, and we'd walk in and they go, right, your song's ready. And I went, okay. They go, you just got to go in there, give it a bit of vocals, and you know, we'll stick it on. We've got a bit of Kylie and a bit of Rick Astley there on the backing vocals. Oh, I think, yeah, they were here, so they just did a bit of vocals for you, along with a few others. We used all the other Miriam Stockley and all these other people we used for backing vocals. They were all on it, so they'll make you sound good. So the track's all ready. Go in and just sing a bit, and then we're done. I went, oh. And I used to go in and sing it, and I thought I sounded great. Took one headphone off one ear and looked like I was doing Live Aid, you know, Band Aid, should I say. And, you know, Pete Waterman used to walk in and say, yeah, can you stand back a bit, Pat, from the mic? And I went, well, yeah, how far? And he went, how about Edinburgh? I mean, and he used to bring me in and press the solo button on all their digital desk, and it would literally go, well, whether it was digital or analog, I don't know in those days, but either way, it all had all these flying faders, and he'd press one button, all the faders would go down, and you would just hear my voice. And he went, this is why. And it was like, I haven't stopped dancing yet. And I went, wow. So I realised what he meant. I mean, Mick actually got a good voice, and his vocals are much more prominent on all our records, and he sings really well. Me, not so much.
So we need to talk a little bit about Funhouse. What led to you getting the role of Funhouse presenter?
Gosh, well, there was an audition, Craig, that my manager, the aforementioned Michael, put me up for with Scottish Television. I went for a couple of meetings, and they said, yep, come up to Glasgow. We've got this set all arranged with this show from America. They gave me a videotape of the American show, and the American show looked good. I watched it with a host called J.D. Roth, and I thought, wow, I'm going to be the English J.D. Roth, P Sharp. And doesn't sound quite as good, does it? But the video, you know, it was good. The games looked good. I was in my 20s and felt young and bright and enthusiastic. So I thought, well, I will go off and do the audition. So I arrived at the airport in Glasgow, and there's 4 girls who are the twins, Melanie and Martina, who went on to do the show with me, and 2 other girls who are not twins. And there's also one other presenter who I don't meet, but I know him anyway from doing satellite television, because I've been doing Sky all these years beforehand in Europe on Sky Channel as a VJ and a video jockey doing that. And this guy's on one of the other channels. And when I get to the airport with the sort of the girl who looked after us to take me back after my audition that I've done with the twins and with the other 2 girls, this guy is then picked up as I go home, and he goes to do his audition with the twins and with the other 2 girls, and the rest is history. But the guy who did that and didn't get the job was John Leslie, and he, even though he auditioned for it, didn't get it. The reason he didn't get it was probably not because he was any worse than me or better than me. It was simply because he looked too tall, apparently. This show was to be made by Scottish TV for national ITV, and John was very tall, or is very tall. I saw him about a year or so ago at a gig, and he's still very, very tall. He hasn't shrunk. And he's about 6'6" or 7 or something, and the twins are about 5'2", and the other girls weren't tall either. And he towered over them so much. And also, I don't know if this is true, but I think that maybe Scottish television thought it was a bit odd if they hired a Scottish guy to do the show for national ITV, because even though it's being made in Scotland, and STV was all over or Scottish television was all over the T-shirts of the kids when they played it, I think maybe they thought I'd just have a generic sort of British guy that covered everything like that. So they went for my London accent, my London look, my long hair, and perhaps they also thought that me and the twins, with all long blonde hair, we just looked like 3 girls, so maybe it was perfect. I don't know, but either way, look, that was my lucky break in my life, because I got that show, and we did the show for a decade or more, 11 years or something, and it was always number one, right from the word go, pretty much until the end, and millions of people. Yeah, I did a gig on Saturday, on April the 27th, 2019, and a Butlins Weekender. I walked out and went, who remembers Funhouse? And like 3,500 people went, everyone loves it. To this day, I have people who say to me, like, big, some great big bald bloke with tattoos, where everyone would come up to me and go, oi. I go, yeah? He goes, you made my childhood. And I go, well, that's just as well, isn't it, really, considering? So that's good to hear, because I thought you were going to kill me. But and to have someone, a guy, not necessarily a girl, but a guy, say you made my childhood, I think is quite an accolade that I should be extremely proud of and very grateful for. So I feel totally blessed that people feel that. And it's amazing. People go, oh my God, I love Funhouse. It was my dream to always be on it. If I could have got on Funhouse, every day after school I'd come and shut my bag down on a Friday and didn't do my homework, but I had to put it on. I mean, there's never going to be anything like that nowadays with someone. A kid's never going to experience that. It's going to be the equivalent of a teenager going to a record shop with their pocket money and buying a single and coming home and putting it on. No one's going to have that love and that feeling for all those amazing things that I had when I was younger, and indeed got when I was hosting Funhouse. I think when I hosted Funhouse, I had no idea that it would ever be, all these years on, remain so fondly in people's hearts. So absolutely incredible that something could do that. Because now, with so many TV channels and so many people just looking for likes on their phones or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or this or Snapchat or that or whatever, you can't keep track of what was on. When I was on the telly doing those shows, there were 4 channels. It wasn't even 5 channels. There was 4 channels. There was a handful of radio stations. And that was it. That's why, the Capital Radio thing was so big. That's why people would come and stand outside the radio station to see us and meet us. We were like pop stars. And, and then when we did become pop stars with the charity records, it made it even more amazing. So I've been charmed for the things that I've managed to be involved with.
You must not have wanted to go home at the end of the day after Funhouse, because surely you just want to drive round in the go-karts or run through the Funhouse and stuff.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Craig, is that we weren't allowed to do anything like that. Even when the kids were in the studio, we were not even allowed to actually go into the funhouse at all, because it gave out the wrong impression to the kids watching that adults could be in there. They wanted to make it out that it was only ever kids who ever went in there, and it was kids who built it, and it was kids who designed it, and it was kids who filmed it. They tried to keep the cameramen hidden out of the way when they were in the funhouse, so it just looked like it was this wondrous place where only kids would go. So we were never allowed in there. I think we went in a couple of times when there was nobody in the studio and they weren't filming, but in general, no, it was an adult-free zone that had to look like it was just for kids. We were told that by the bosses.
Did any of the kids ever misbehave and you couldn't show things on TV?
Yeah, quite often they were quite rude and stuff, and a bit saucy, and often it wasn't even the kids who were the contestants. It would be the kids in the audience who came in from Scottish schools and were brought in to watch the show. We're obviously gutted that they weren't on it, and were screaming obscenities, either the 4 children who were on it, or indeed the twins. Most of these young lads who were about 12 would scream at Melanie and Martina, going, "Melanie, Martina, I want to get hold of you." And they were like, it was quite bizarre. And I think these kids, they weren't that outrageous or that naughty, but they were just bored because they probably thought they were going to come in there for 20 minutes and watch Funhouse like it was on the telly. And of course, they came in there for 2 hours and probably saw one thing happen, because TV takes an awful lot longer than it. And then, we were spending 7 or 8 hours making a show. So sometimes we would have 15, 16-hour days and work really hard to produce 2 shows a day, because we made 2 shows a day for 7 days. And that was 14 weeks, and that was the series that it went out for on the telly. 13 or 14 episodes in each series, and it was done once a year. So Funhouse only took me 1 week a year. 7 days of each year, I went in, worked hard for 7 days, and that was it, done. And I never went back again for another year.
Do you have any secrets you can tell me about Funhouse? Anything that's remained a secret right up until now?
I don't know if they're secrets, because there's quite a lot of people out there who saw most of the things that happened, i.e., for example, the kid who carried on over the finish line in the go-kart and didn't stop and banged me into the hoardings at the side while I was doing the checkered flag to say you've won. He just kept on going. I think he was on a bet with his mate and said, "Go on, smash him out." So that's on one of the episodes. Secrets-wise, I suppose the only real secret that nobody ever saw is what the gunge was made of. And it's
Hi, this is Bunty from Nicky and Bunty over on the Twitter internets, bringing you a brief intermission while the secrets of what was actually in the gunge is discussed. Having heard the chat in full, I can assure you, you do not want to know. Believe me. How it got through health and safety, I do not know. Some of the words I'm saving you from hearing include bodily, pre-digested, and scrapings. By talking over it, I'm saving you for something really bad. You'll thank me later. Only joking.
Secrets-wise, I suppose the only real secret that nobody ever saw is what the gunge was made of. And it's a secret because I don't know. All I know is they had stagehands back in 1989 when we first made the first series, or 88 when we made it. It went out in February 89, but we made it, I think, in August 88, the series. They would just stir just gunk. It was water and paste and God knows what, because they had to create gunk in this big sort of massive container, and they would stir it with a bit of wood, and the wood had splinters on it which would come off, and they would just go, "Oh, you southern Jessies, get on with it." They would just make and create this stuff that God knows what it had in it, and there was no health and safety things like there are now, and the kids used to put their head in things, and it was bubbling up from underneath in gunge, and they would get soaked, and then they would come out and go, "Oh, I don't feel well." We would go, "Oh, get on with it." And then they would, stop wimping around. And some kids would get winded during a game, and they'd be standing there trying to answer a question to get a further 25 points. And then they were taken off to hospital because they were just injured. It was a tough old thing to do. It was, very early days of sort of non-PC TV. And I'm not sure that we would have got away with those kind of things these days,
That's amazing. They didn't know what was in it.
No idea, no. I think they probably weed in it, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, we forgot about this bit. Sorry.
I really do. They were like, they were big Scottish lads who were stagehands, and they were just told to make gunk. They went, "Oh, okay, well, I'll make some gunk." Well, it was, who knows what was in it. It was the 80s. It was all rock and roll, but it would never, ever survive any tests. Wouldn't pass anything these days, I don't think.
And you're so well known for your hair as well. And in 1992, you lopped it all off.
Yeah, it was a bit later than 92, I think. Our youngest daughter was born in 92, Charlotte. She's getting married this year, which is inconsequential, except for the fact that I've got to pay for the wedding, blah, blah, blah. But I think that it was probably 94. It's stuck in fable as to when it came off, but certainly it was literally, a quarter of a century ago that it came off, because I remember Charlotte being able to tug my long hair, so she must have been at least 1 or 2 still doing that, and then suddenly it came off, and I didn't have it all off in one go, Craig. I had a bit of a bob to start with, because it was all a bit too much, terrifying for me to cut it all off in one go. So I had a bob, and then that became like a bit shorter, and now it's almost sensible.
I've had long hair since about 1991. I still do.
Really?
I just cannot get rid of it.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. That's a good sign. There's a lot of people who've had long hair since 92 who would love to have long hair, but they can't because they've got no hair. So you've had a result. A lot of people obviously, lose their hair and stuff. But I've still got good hair, and my hairdresser says it's a good head of hair, but I do like it short, I have to say. Don't like it even when it gets slightly long or tufty. I'd rather it was just neat and tidy and short, so I've definitely gone the other way.
So since Funhouse ended in 1999-2000, you've been on Weakest Link, been in the Jungle, been through the Keyhole, regularly DJ. What are you currently doing nowadays?
Well, nowadays I'm back on the radio doing a new radio show, which is great. I work for a Bauer media station, which is a sister station to Kiss and Magic and Absolute and stations and brands like that. It's called Greatest Hits Radio, which is really good for me because it's a retro station just playing the songs that I made famous first time around. All those tunes from the 70s, 80s and 90s that I was playing on Capital and other stations like Heart and Smooth and Radio 1, they're all being played again now on this station. So I do a show on there every weekend, and I also cover Mark Goodyear when he's off on holiday during the week. I wouldn't have time to do a daily radio show again these days because I'm just too busy. I do most of my work is gigs and PAs and corporate hostings and festivals and after dinner speaking and DJ sets all over the world, from Oman and Dubai and snow bombing in Austria to Norway and obviously all across the UK. So I'm really very much a live DJ would be my main work these days, doing DJ sets everywhere and anywhere. So it's good fun.
And where can people find you online nowadays? Do you use Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, I use all those. I guess you just find me. I'm at Pat Sharp on Twitter, and I'm at Mr. Pat Sharp on Instagram, and I've got a couple of Facebook pages, like a fan page and a regular page, and I'm also at patsharp.co.uk, which lists all my gigs, and I've even got an app, so you can download my app. Just search my name, and you get a free app which lists all my gigs and personal appearances, and there's some other fun stuff on there as well to play around with.